So we're super glad to be back for the September meeting of the Stage Hypnotist Mastermind, and we're lucky to be joined by Anthony Galie today, who is a salty old veteran.
I guess you could.
Has anyone ever used that term with you, Anthony?
No, I've never been. But it's something I'm going to hear it more often.
So we met briefly at the Ultimate Stage Hypnotist conference about almost 4 years ago now. We both spoke at that, and I loved spending time with you there. I still have so much more to learn about you. How long have you actually, all joking aside, how long have you been in the industry?
Doing hypnosis or the corporate speaking?
Let's start with hypnosis.
Since I was a kid.
Really?
Started like when I was 9, 10 years old. And then, until they stopped me. And then when I was 17, or I guess 15 or 16, old enough to drive, I drove over to the next town and started taking classes. And then was doing stage hypnosis during college.
Wow.
When I got out of college, I went to graduate school. And one of the guys who was in the graduate program, there were only 8 of us, but one of them was about 12 years older than I was. He had a wife and 2 kids, and he had an established hypnotherapy practice in Fort Lauderdale. I went to Florida Atlantic University for a master's degree in Boca Raton. And as the program was coming to an end, he offered to sell me his hypnotherapy practice, which was not at all what I had intended to do. But so I did that for 4 years. And then I moved to Hawaii, and that's where I started doing the corporate hypnosis, because there just wasn't enough people in the immediate area. I lived in a very remote corner of the Hawaiian Islands. And wait, before I'm going to pause the question I just had. Sure. How did you get turned on to hypnotism at 9 or 10 years old? Tell me the brief version. I saw a TV program. Yeah. I remember what it was. It's called The Life of Riley. It was an episode where William Bendix gets hypnotized by a hypnotist, and I was like, what is that? And so I started riding my bicycle to the library and trying to figure out as much as I could, and then buying stuff off the back of Batman comic books.
Get out of here.
No kidding.
That's awesome.
There was a book that was called Advanced Techniques of Hypnosis by a guy named Melvin Powers, which was actually a decent book. I mean, surprisingly enough, it was actually a pretty good book. So that's how it started. So
I've interviewed a lot of hypnotists, and what I find overwhelmingly is most of them, the vast majority of them, get into hypnotism because some kind of a mentor figure encourages them to, or they have some kind of an injury or illness which other traditional modalities don't help. And so they get to that, I ran out of options, and then I tried hypnosis, and it made such a profound impact on them that then they became hypnotists. You are only the second hypnotist I've ever talked to who knew at that age that you, usually it's a later in life thing. And I talked with one other gentleman who was originally from Cuba, and he was 9 years old, and he saw a stage hypnotism act when he was 9 years old, and said, I knew then and there I wanted to be a hypnotist. That's cool. That's cool. So we go to Hawaii. Yes. And you decide, now, what, same kind of question really at a later point in your timeline, where was the impetus for getting into corporate work?
Necessity is the mother of invention. I had moved myself to an area. It was beautiful, and I'm glad I did it. It was like the Garden of Eden where I lived. It was called a kapuka. Anyhow, there was no public water, no electricity, no telephone. I was about 4 miles from the nearest phone. And I had sold the practice in Fort Lauderdale at a handsome profit. And I thought I could live out there for quite a few years. And I guess the money lasted 2 years or whatever. And I ended up having to do something. And I was going to buy a farm. That was actually the first option. and the second was the person I was with said, you should be teaching sales seminars to real estate, to realtors. And my answer was, I've never sold anything in my life, and I don't know anything about real estate. And her thing was, well, don't let that stop you. And she kept bugging me about it. And so one day I drove 3 or 4 miles down to the nearest phone and started making calls to Honolulu. And I began by calling real estate companies. And the reason they all have, not all of them, but many of them have large sales forces. Well, they'll have 50 or 60 realtors, and they all have meetings. And believe it or not, they all bring in speakers. So I called and said, I just moved here from Florida. I'm a hypnotherapist. I want to come and talk to people. And that is pretty much what began the process.
First of all, you're living a different kind of life when you say your first option was to buy the papaya farm.
Yeah, this is a different kind of life. Definitely. Like I said,
love
no
it.
electricity, no public. It sounds like it's primitive. It's actually awesome.
Yeah.
There was a 5 kilowatt generator, and there were plugs and wall sockets and stuff. And if you wanted electricity for vacuuming or something, you turn the generator on. But when you turn the generator on, it charged these deep cycle batteries, and the batteries are what worked the lights overhead, because you could get marine lights that were 12-volt light bulbs, and the refrigerator you had a 200-gallon propane tank, and that was for the refrigerator ran on propane. Believe it or not, the first refrigerators all ran on propane.
Yeah.
So they had like this 1930s version of a refrigerator that ran, and the stove was gas, the hot water heater was gas, and the rest was battery. So.
Super cool. Super cool. Now, the next point I want to sort of redraw attention to is, so from early on in your process, you were different than what a lot of us think of as corporate hypnotists. You weren't targeting right away, just doing big corporate conferences or big corporate celebrations. I mean, there was right away, you're saying there was this aspect of this teaching about sales and targeting real estate training development. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, it actually originated back in Fort Lauderdale when I was in private practice. I had a client that had been referred by a doctor who had diabetes. And doctor called me and said he's got a weight problem. He's really got to lose weight. He was an excellent hypnotic subject, and he was losing weight. He was doing very well. And I guess it was the 3rd or 4th session, he asked me, what is this? How is this working? I really don't feel like I'm dieting or anything, and yet I'm losing weight. So I described to him what I thought was happening. And he's the one that said, have you ever spoken to a business? I said, no. And he said, well, I own this real estate company. And it was actually on the same road my practice was, Oakland Park Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale, about 2 miles down the road. And I told him I wouldn't know what to say to a bunch of salespeople. He said, say to them what you just said to me to describe, how you think this works. And so the very first talk I ever gave, I recall saying, I really don't know anything about real estate or sales, but I'm a hypnotherapist, and I've helped quite a few people stop smoking, lose weight, control personal habits. And this, your boss thinks this would be relevant to you. So this is how I think your mind works, and this is how I think changing behavior can be done. And they came up afterward. It was just different. It was something that had really, certainly not in the mainstream, ever been done before. And I wasn't saying anything new, I don't think, but I was saying it in a different way. I was using hypnosis as the modality, as opposed to all the other motivational speakers that were out there. So I'd had that experience. And when I ended up in Hawaii, debating whether to buy the papaya farm or not, that's when, the suggestion was made, well, you should go actually, teach seminars to these realtors. So that's how I ended up driving 3 or 4 miles and started calling real estate companies in Honolulu.
Around what year was that, Anthony? So people can get a sense of like the cultural time frame.
Sure. January of 1980. Reagan had been elected, but not inaugurated. It was the first or second week in January.
And back then, beyond, I mean, I get the initial focus on real estate. What was your sense of sort of the corporate market at a broader level then? Did you think that there was room for a lot more than the real estate targeting, or like, what was your kind of read on that?
I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
I loved hypnosis. I knew that. I had no problem. I could go on and on about hypnosis, but I had gone through this master's program, so I was chock full of learning theory. I knew that I could stand in front of a group of people and communicate concepts. But as far as being a business person, I'd never been a business person. I'd been in academia all the way up to the point where, I kind of took over this pre-existing practice, and I only did that for 2.5, 3 years. So I just went out, and I think part of it was the enthusiasm that I had, because I really loved, I think people could tell how much I loved what I was doing, but I dressed improperly. I had hair down my shoulders. I was wearing a mustache. I was wearing this ridiculous outfit. And from a business point of view, I made probably every mistake that could be made. And I mean, I look back on it, I have to chuckle because it was so stupid. Some of the things I did were so dumb. But you know, one by one, I corrected the mistakes, and it was really the audience that got me to go where I was going. You know, afterwards they would say, "I really liked when you talked about this, but when you went into that area, I felt like it wasn't relevant, or it wasn't something that really moved me." And so I just kept listening to what the audience was saying and tuned into it.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you know, step by step, you figure out what works and what doesn't work. The reason people see my stuff on YouTube and they'll say, I think you just referred to it, you look different than most people who do the hypnosis or use it. And the only reason I look different is because I didn't have anybody to model after. I was in the middle of nowhere. You know, I mean, there was no internet. I could not, I mean, for me, the treat was to get the Honolulu Library once a month or so, if I could find the time to go over there. That was my only source of information. Wow. So I didn't have, it wasn't like I could go in the weekend and see a stage hypnotist, or I could turn on a TV. And
you certainly couldn't fire up YouTube and watch videos to your heart's content, right? Like, it was a very different, yeah, that's amazing. That's so amazing. So let's drill deeper on that aspect, Anthony. Like, when you sit here today and you look back, we're talking 40 years of your own evolution through this. Is it a vast expanse, or has it been a very sort of slow and steady development that you've, how would you describe it?
I think I heard your question. You cut in and out during that question, but I think I heard. You're back now. I think you asked me, was it a steady progression from point A to, you know, speaking in front of 5,000 people?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. I had no master plan. I was doing everything backwards. More, you know, I think that I got pushed forward because it was clear I knew what I was talking about. What I was doing was different. And the style that I had was very amenable to business. I was not making fun of the subjects. I was not talking down to people. I was doing my best to explain to them what was happening as it was happening. And that, I think, was a bit different. In the 80s, if you called a company and said, I'm going to do something and part of it's hypnosis, they'd hang the phone up. That was, the 80s was, you got to be kidding. There's no way I want anything to do with hypnosis. And so I had to learn to package it in a way that was acceptable to people. And that was a long, drawn out process. You know, I mean, I made about every mistake you could possibly make.
So it sounds like you were really approaching it more often as an educator. I mean, you were from academia, and you were not going in and trying to be like, I'm gonna put on this great show for you, I'm gonna blow your minds with hypnosis. It was very much like, I'm gonna help you understand how this modality that I know can help you get more of X done.
Yes.
Is that?
And underneath it all, I had, from the very first readings of hypnosis, and I'm talking back when I would go to the library as a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, I would see over and over again the statement that no one knew what hypnosis really was, that there is still no generally accepted, you know, theory. And so a big part of what drove me was I always wanted to know what it was. People would often comment after some of the presentations, you look like you were having more fun up there than anybody else. And I was, you know, I would see people do, you know, not be able to get out of the chair for $2,000. I was like, what the hell is going on inside their head? And I was fascinated by that. That drove me. The other thing was I enjoyed sharing the information with people. I wanted people to know that this existed and, you know, could be used. And I think those two notions came out. So,
yeah. Tell us about the state of the corporate field, the corporate market today. Do you feel like you can just keep doing what you've been doing, or have you even had, with all your experience, have you had to make a shift in how you approach things for what corporate groups want today?
Oh, good question. Yes and no. Having been in it since 1980, I can tell you that there are absolutely trends that go on in public speaking. For example, in 1980, it was all about computers. They were talking about the paperless office, and people were all buying these desktop. Apple had been, I guess, 1978 or 79. IBM came out in 81 with their desktop, and it was all about the computer revolution. So wrapped around in my talk, I had to talk about how the change of the computer is going to affect the way you deal with things in the office. It's nothing to be afraid of. You can use this visualization technique to help see yourself more efficient, more accepting the changes. Keep in mind, desktop computers at one time were real scary things. And then, later on in the 80s, I don't know if you would recall or not, but they had all these mergers, these giant mergers going on. You had Michael Milken selling these junk bonds, and you had Nabisco merging with whatever it was. You had all these giant corporations coming together. So the buzzwords in the mid to late 80s were synergy. Your company just got bought, or your company just bought this other group, and they're all going to come in and be part of this team now. How do you handle this mental change of a new company running you, or a new style of management? And that was big in the 80s. The 90s was .com. Went through a period, I guess, from 94 to the end of the 90s. That was, everything was .com. Everything was, and the stock market was going to go to 1 million and never come down. That was, and then you had the, so it goes through phases. And the phase right now is twofold. If you're going to be a corporate speaker, a theme you're going to hear from a lot of them is, number one, recovering mentally from the pandemic. We just came out of this 2 years, you're going back into the office again, the culture's different. You have to re-crank yourself up. And equally important is the robots are coming. Everyone who's in the know knows that artificial intelligence is real, and it's around the corner. And it's estimated that within 10 years, 50% of the job titles that exist today will not exist 10 years from now. Now, what does that mean? 8-9 years ago, if you crossed a bridge in New York, you had toll booth collectors. You'd go up and there'd be 8 or 9 toll booths that were manned by people, 24 hours a people. You talk about, let's say, 10 people. Right there, you're talking about 30 jobs, and there are no toll booth collectors anymore. It's all been automated with the transponder. If you used to go to a casino, all these women would be out with the change thing. If you wanted to give them a $10 bill, they give you a bucket of quarters and all that jazz. It's all, those people are gone. That job title doesn't exist anymore. If you go to the grocery store, you have to pay now to have a human being check it out. There's one person checking out and 80 people doing it themselves. That's automation. That's IT automation. And that's going to hit people everywhere. That's going to wipe out about half of the job titles that currently exist. And it's a good thing in one way, but the fear is twofold. Number one, how am I going to adjust that change? I'm a 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old. How am I going to make that adjustment? And number two, what jobs are out there for me if I'm not going to be a toll collector anymore? I'm not going to be a person that works in networking anymore. I'm not going to be in the payroll department anymore. All of that's being automated. And that's the hot topic right now.
Amazing. All totally makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Comes in phases, So
Yeah.
if you're a public speaker and you talk to a decision maker, one of the things that I would say to them is, I teach these techniques for internalizing goals. And one of the advantages is that it can help people make that mental adjustment, see themselves succeeding in the new world, in the computer-generated IT world we now live in.
Anthony, probably the sense I've gotten from this group is that those of our members who are more interested in getting into corporate work are probably not so much looking to be corporate speakers as to be corporate entertainers. Of course, they could always change that. They could evolve to do both, or, but can you give us a sense of how's that ratio? Like like in terms of people actually with the power to buy who are out there, how many of them really are looking for someone that's more in your mold, speaker, trainer, consultant, speaker type, versus we're going to have a big event, a fun event, and we just want more of a pure entertainer? Do you have a sense of how that breaks down?
Yeah, there in the corporate speaking world, there's a million subsets, but I think you can break it into three giant categories. One is celebrity. If you're famous, if you're Bill Clinton or former President Bush or something, that's $150,000 just to show up. If you're famous, celebrities. Another giant chunk of it is what we in the business call flash in the pan speakers. They did something that put them in the news. They just, climbed Mount Everest backwards blind, or they just saved the puppy, or for some reason they're in the news. They just won America's Got Talent. They just did something of notoriety that people want to see them. Those people come and go, a lot of them, but if something happens that they get national publicity, they can get on a speaking tour sometimes 2, 3, 4 years before they kind of lose their notoriety. And the third category, which is what I fall into, is industry expert. And they would hire us to come in and bring some type of information or technique that is not readily available. If you want to go and say, I'm going to teach you how to have a positive attitude, well, I'm going to read Think and Grow Rich. I'm going to empower positive thinking. If you just say positive attitude, you're not, emotional intelligence is probably not going to get you hired. But in my particular case, I'm going to teach 3 simple techniques to internalize goals. They're going to walk out the door being able to use one or all of them to immediately push up their business production. And one of them happens to be self-hypnosis. And I'm actually going to demonstrate it by bringing people up out of the audience. That's different. It's goal setting, which is as old as the hills. You can't get much more ubiquitous than goal setting, but goal setting with that twist of the hypnosis was something. And to answer your question, I've had a number of meeting planners comment. What I really liked about what you did was the first half of your presentation was solid content. It was stuff they could actually go out and use to be more productive. It was, it's not something I think that was new, but the way you put it together was something that got through to some of the people, and they're really going to be able to go out and do something with it. And the second part, where you hypnotize people, I haven't seen them laugh that hard in years. So I kind of feel like I got, 2 for the price of 1. So to totally answer your question, there's a segment of the corporate world that hires entertainers, and a perfect example of that is one of my former attendees. I don't know if you ever heard of Wayne Lee out of Canada, but if you haven't heard and you Google him, Wayne does corporate work with, it's entertainment. And he's on the big stage. He's doing, I think his sample space is somewhat smaller than mine, but he's doing great. He knows how to market. He's got a great presentation. He's got a great presence on stage. It's all about, at the end, he hasn't touched their heart and they feel good and all. They're not going out like they've learned something new to push up business production, but they've had a great time. They've been entertained. They, hopefully he elucidates, or illustrates some of what he's doing. And if you Google him, look at his videos on YouTube, you'll see how a corporate hypnotist can do it primarily as entertainment. I chose the direction I chose, didn't know any better, probably. Like I said, again, mine wasn't from careful planning. I just come from this master's program in experimental psych, and I knew a lot of learning theory. So that's how it got integrated into my talk.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Hey, I want to open it up to the rest of you. I've gone a little longer than I normally do because I just am so excited to talk with Anthony, but I imagine some of you must have questions too. So if you do, just you know how we all run this. Just unmute yourself and we'll be work as well we can with each other. Who's got a question for Anthony?
Oh, Brenda's up there. Hi, Brenda.
Hi, Anthony. I don't have a question as much as I have a comment, because
Okay.
I took your training, well, I don't know, it was like 4 years ago now, a while ago. And I love and adore your support and encouragement. And it's because of you that I charge the most I've ever charged for a show in my life.
You're beautiful. Thank you so much.
So
Nice to
thank you for that.
see you in 4 years. You know who was the last program? Do you remember Deanna Nunez?
Yeah, I love her.
She's doing the same thing. She's done such a good job of transitioning into corporate. She's got a great website and a great presence. So good to see you.
Yeah. And thank you so much for just re-energizing this for me. And to speak to the difference between doing hypnosis for entertainment and corporate hypnosis, or like in the corporate world, I find that a lot of people that book hypnotists for entertainment put us in the category along with jugglers, balloon twisters, magicians, like on that variety novelty stage. But when you are a corporate speaker, when you're speaking about hypnosis from an educational standpoint, I think you're valued a little bit higher than just a comedy act. So I think
absolutely agree with you. One of the comments I often open up the course with is when I've seen stage hypnotists and hypnotherapists try to move into the corporate area where you're giving a serious talk, so to speak, they make very similar mistakes. If it's a stage hypnotist, I'll tell them make 10 phone calls to decision makers who are considering hiring a speaker. And out of the 10, you're probably going to get 4 or 5 that ask you this question. All right, if we bring you in, what's the takeaway? What are my people going to have after you give this talk that they don't have now? What am I getting for my money is what they're really asking. And here's how most stage hypnotists answer that question. They're going to laugh so hard, they're going to be laughing a week later. I am going to amaze them. They're going to be astounded at what they see. They're going to have such a good time, best time they've had in years. And all of that is great, but it just branded them as an entertainer. And you're right, entertainers are, I don't mean to be facetious, but that's in a slot with the, I don't know if you know the team that does the juggling and stuff like that. It's entertainment. It's not money. It's not information that's going to make them more money. The hypnotherapist will often answer the question and say, they're going to get more self-actualized. They're going to learn how to control personal habits. They're going to be much more relaxed, much more in tune with themselves. And the fact is, most business owners or most decision makers will say, that's great, but I really don't care if they're self-actualized or not. I mean, I need them. I mean, I think that I hope they are. You know, I'm a nice guy. I'm a business owner, but my real bottom thing is about the bottom line. And so it's how they present it. And that's why I pointed you toward Wayne Lee. Wayne's done a masterful job of when he pitches his talk, of pitching it as a serious corporate talk. So he ends up in front of conventions. Whereas most people that don't pitch it that, they pitch it as entertainment, they're the after dinner speaker, or they're the last speaker at the end of the thing where they're all having fun, or the Saturday afternoon pool party speaker stuff. Some of them are doing it outside, you know, which is a big pain in the neck. But yeah, it's how it's Mars and Venus. You know, naturally, a hypnotherapist or a stage hypnotist is going to present or pitch their presentation because that some of them have spent years and years becoming experts at it. It's what they eat, breathe, and sleep. And so that's what they're going to present themselves as. But then the other person they're talking to is a business owner or a business decision maker. And they're thinking about, what am I getting for my $10,000? Or what, you know, what's the value? It's, they think like a business and act like a business because they are a business. It's what they're supposed to be doing. And that's a mistake. I think the most common mistake people trying to transition from stage hypnosis or hypnotherapy into corporate hypnosis makes. You've changed, Brenda. Did you pull your wig off or something?
Terry, did you have a question? Is that why you popped on?
I know. I was just going to say, it's so good to hear from Mr. Galie again. I always enjoy listening to him. But as you can see, I've crawled inside this airplane, and I'm going to have to shut you down so I can fire this up and get on to my next project. But I'll see you next month, Paul.
All right, Terry, fly safely.
See you guys. Thank you. Bye.
Awesome.
Terry, so classic.
Who am I speaking to?
I just climbed in this airplane.
Are these guys all stage hypnotists?
Yeah. Yeah,
Go-
this mastermind is, yeah, we don't, we're trying to build a welcoming community, Anthony, that is also to some extent exclusive. We're really asking that the people who join, and again, this is, no one has to pay to be here, but we do say, like, you should only really be here if you're a working stage hypnotist. And that, because we really want to advance the craft. We want people to really work on whatever portion of their craft is important to them, but my sort of vision for this was to really create a space where there's more support for stage hypnotists to do that. And this group is fantastic.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And I see 5 or 6. Are there more than 5 or 6 in attendance?
Yeah, so we send out the replay, and we've got people in different time zones, and we've got, Jeff and Adrian are both, it's probably very late for them. They're in Europe, and we have even a couple people that are in Australia, and so the time is so off that they only ever watch it on replay. So we've got folks from all over, and some of them can't be here at the time that we normally meet, and they just catch it later on replay. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Yeah. Does anybody else have questions for Anthony?
So I would love to know, I have been doing the college market for the past 4 or 5 years, and I've been curious about breaking into doing corporate. I sort of accidentally stumbled into doing shows for Tony Robbins and Russell Brunson over the last year, which were really cool opportunities, but those went really, really well. And so in my mind thinking, oh, I did that for them, I could easily break into doing other corporations as well. But the thought process was, how much of that split do I want it to be versus the entertainment versus the speaking? So when I did the show for Russell Brunson a couple months ago, I did a show for them on one night and did just the stage show, the hour-and-a-half stage show. And then the following day, the next morning, I was the first speaker and sort of spoke as a follow-up of, hey, you saw the fun side of it, but here's the transformational side of it. Here's the mindset stuff, the personal development. And so I know I can do both pieces, but in my mind, thinking about how I should approach these corporate shows, should I put it out as kind of a 50-50, hey, I'll do the show and then I'll do a follow-up. I could do just a show or just the speaking. Or is there a world where, I don't know how you do it, do you marry them? Is it like a 2-3 hour thing where part of it's entertainment, part of it's the performance? I'm curious what your thought process would be on how should I put that out and market it as one or the other, or what's that split or ratio look like?
You can certainly do one or the other. What I do is both. When people ask me what I do, it's pretty much split down the middle. The most common talk I give is 90 minutes. Sometimes it's 60, depending on the group. But if it's 90 minutes, 45 minutes is content where I'm showing them simple, hands-on, transferable techniques that really work, and then transition into the hypnosis demonstration. And that's the last 45 minutes. In other words, you could, and that's how I would pitch it to the corporation, because clearly the part where you're talking about the transition and what it really is and what the content, how it can be valuable, that's what the decision maker is going to buy. And one thing I guess I haven't mentioned, what really made my program work, what really is when I was doing half of it was content, and then I would transition into a hypnosis demonstration. And I assumed that the people would make the connection. I was talking about visualization, self-image, and now I'm doing this demonstration of hypnosis. And the person I was with said, I don't think they're making the connection. How could they not make the connection? You just spent 45 minutes. And she said, no, I think you need to connect the hypnosis demonstration to what you were talking about earlier with self-image. And I actually had this on video that the next day I was speaking at Prudential Insurance's annual meeting on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry. And I took what she said to heart, and I was thinking, how could I do that? And I actually have it on video. And it was the first time that I ever did that, when I was doing something to where, like, you're stuck to your chair, you can't, get up for $2,000 or whatever it was I was doing. I would take a few minutes and say, not being able to see your shoe in your hand is like not seeing the telephone or not seeing the client as a source of referrals. Every time I would do something in the hypnosis, I would relate it back to something I had said earlier in the first part of my talk. I connected them. And that was the magic formula. That was, I got a standing ovation. That was the first time I heard people come up to me and say, that changed my life. That's the most amazing thing. And like I said, it wasn't even my idea. So if I were giving you advice, I'd say do both. I'd say take the content part, It doesn't have to be first, it can be the second, but take the content and use that to transition into your hypnosis demonstration. But whenever you do your hypnosis, always, whenever possible, refer back. Remember earlier I said something, well, this is an example of it. Remember earlier, this is an example in your business. This is an example when you don't pick up the phone, when you forget to ask for referrals, when you're afraid to ask for the sale or whatever the audience is. That was made a real change in how people responded to my presentation.
And would you market that as saying you're doing the split of, hey, I'm going to do both, I'm going to tie it in, I'm going to do entertainment and the content? Or would you just put it out as I'm going to do the content and then sort of add that as a surprise of, hey, by the way, there's going to be more fun elements?
You really never want to surprise them. No, you don't want to surprise them, because you'll invariably get some ultra religious person sitting in the third row in the middle who feel they can't get up and walk out, and they'll feel like they're trapped. You don't hide it. However, here's the key to it. If you were a decision maker and I called you and you said to me, what is it you do? Who are you and what do you speak about? My name is Anthony Galie. I'm a corporate keynote speaker. I do a presentation called The Subconscious Aspects of Business. It's 3 simple, powerful techniques to internalize goals. They're going to walk out the door being able to use one or all of them. And by the way, one of them happens to be self-hypnosis, where I actually do a demonstration. That's the way I pitch it. You want to know how I used to pitch it? I'm Anthony Galie. I'm a corporate hypnotist. Excuse me. I do a presentation called The Subconscious Aspects of Business, and I could see it in their eyes. Half of them, as soon as corporate hypnotists, they did not hear anything I said after that. I had branded myself in the first 5 seconds, and the rest of it never got through. So if you look at my websites, I'm not a hypnotist. I'm a corporate speaker. One of the things I do happens to be this hypnosis demonstration, but I'm not a hypnotist, because we know what a hypnotist is. That's dancing with broomsticks and quacking like ducks. And that's not what I want for my corporate presentation. So that's how I overcame that. I never surprised people, and I never tried to call it something else. I'm going to show them autogenic training, creative visualization. It's hypnosis, but it can be very useful. And that's the way I would pitch it. And then you have to call your presentation something. In 1980, I came up with one thing that I found out someone else was using it, so I had to change it. And I came up with the subconscious aspects of sales. Too long for today's audiences. The concentration span has shrunk considerably. But in 1980, people still had an attention span. So when I said, the subconscious aspects of sales, it made people curious. It's called the hook. The hook is what makes people want to click on your thing, want to see what it is you have to offer. I'll give you a simple example. Let's say they call a speaker bureau, meeting planner, and says, we want someone that talks about health and nutrition. They send 3 links to videos. And the first speaker's title is Eat Your Way to Success. And the second one is, eat healthy and be successful. And the third one is sick and tired of being sick and tired. Which of those 3 video links is going to get clicked first? 90% of the time.
I like the catchiness of the third one, the sick and tired of being sick and tired.
The catchiness. That's why it's called a hook. You got it exactly right. That's what a hook is. Now, for all the client knows, those 3 links go to exactly the same video. But 90% will click the third one simply because of the hook. So the first thing, what am I going to call this? It's going to make people want to click on that link. And when I say click on that link, it's because today's coin of the realm is the 2 to 3 or 4 minute long demo video. Websites are passé. Obviously no one's mailing out mailers or brochures or folders anymore. It's all that link to the 3 or 4 minute long video. And what you call yourself is the hook. Now, the brand is what you do. And my brand is 3 simple, powerful techniques to internalize goals. That's what I do. So you have to decide, that's the value. If I bring you in, what are my people going to get? 3 simple, powerful techniques, or whatever it is you're selling. So if you were to put your 2 things together and I were in your audience, when I came out, what did I get that I don't have now? And preferably, what did I get that I don't have now? And it's hard for me to find somewhere else because it's not in every book I've ever picked up. he disappeared.
A follow-up question I would have too is the shows that I've been booking right now have been mostly through the agency I'm with. So I'm with the college agency that books the college markets. How would I go about starting to get corporate shows? Would it be, do you tend to book them and find them to yourself? Are there agencies that book corporate, like I have an agency that books college, or is it mostly just you have to put in the work to call those decision makers and find the interested corporations and do that yourself?
The business is set up now, because in the corporate speaking, it is ridiculously lucrative, and it's all an illusion. It just has gotten higher and higher and higher. One of the people who graduated from my program 3 years ago, you may or may not, is currently getting $27,500 per speech. They just keep pushing it until people stop paying it. So the way the business is structured now is that you're either doing your own marketing, or you put together your own marketing team. You have a list of people, or you're booked by a speaker bureau. The speaker bureaus are not going to want to deal with you unless you're already making a lot of money. If they see that you've got a long client list and you've got this perfect presentation, and you've got, how I ended up getting booked by speaker bureaus, I didn't even know they existed. But I was doing all this work with Prudential. Prudential called a speaker bureau. We're doing our annual convention. We want Anthony Galie. Who's Anthony Galie? And New York Life, and then AT&T. These companies that I've done all kinds of work with were mentioning my name to speaker bureaus, so they came looking for me. But they're difficult sometimes to get in front of, because every speaker would like to have speaker bureaus booking them, but they're not going to book you unless you're making a lot of money and you got a lot of bookings. And that because they're not going to make you famous. Not only that, they're not going to know how to sell you. They're not going to know how to sell a hypnosis act. They're just, most speaker bureau reps just don't know how to do that. So that's a goal somewhere in the future after you've got your business established. But if I were starting today, if I were you starting today, I believe there's 3 ways you can start. Number one, you've got an existing client list. If you've been doing all these shows for all these years, I presume you have them somewhere on a database. Call the ones that you know well. These people love me. I got to know this person. I consider this person a friend. I did 3 things for this person. Get that list first. Pick up a phone and call them. I'm moving into corporate. This is what I'm calling it. Do you ever bring in corporate speakers, or in the position you're in, do you know anybody who brings in corporate speakers? Most people are going to say off the top of their head, I can't think of anybody right now, so you have to help them. Well, maybe a member of your family belongs to a big company, someone you go to church with, perhaps a neighbor. My next door neighbor works for AT&T or something. Yeah, they have big meetings. You probably already have a half a dozen corporate talks or more sitting in a database somewhere. And all you have to do is call, and it's a friendly call. The second way of getting into it is start locally. Polish your talk by going to groups like I did. What's the nearest metropolitan area you live near?
I'm in LA.
Well, then you're golden. Open the phone book to real estate offices. Call the first one you see, and you're going to get either a realtor or the receptionist answer the phone. Hi, I'm Anthony Galie. I'm a corporate speaker. Could you tell me who in your office hires the speakers? That would be our broker. Could you tell me his or her name? That's Bill Smith. I don't want to waste Bill Smith's time. Before you put me through to Mr. Smith, can I ask you, how many realtors are there? Some people, well, we've got 14 people here, clearly. Who are the big realtors? Oh, you want to call Caldwell Banker, you want to call this Remax, they'll tell you who the big ones are. 2 or 3 calls, you'll know who the big ones are. They all have meetings. They all have meetings every week, but they all have a kickoff meeting every year, and most of them have a mid-year, and they all hire speakers. They all do. And if you're going to do it, I would set a price bottom line of $5,000 plus expenses. And I wouldn't vary from that fee. If you don't ask for at least $5,000, it's clear you're not a professional. And once you start getting yourself booked at $5,000, then go to 65, go to 7, keep going until they say no, is how you could start. And a third way in which you could get yourself out there is go to any big town website like Las Vegas, like Palm Springs, the Atlantic City, places that have big conventions, they've all got a website for their convention center, and they advertise who's holding the conventions there. They want people to see, look, we have 10,000 people coming for the Kitchen and Bath Association. We've got 5,000, we've got 1,200 coming. They will list the conventions that they're hosting. And if you were to find out that Kitchen and Bath, because they have 50,000 people, just for the record, KBIS, if you see KBIS with 50,000 people at the Las Vegas Convention Center is happening on October 15th, what month of the year do they have their conventions? Obviously, October. So if you go to their website, they're all trying to get you to sign up for the convention, and there'll be a contact. If you have trouble getting your ticket or trouble signing up, call this person. You call that person. I'm a speaker. I come in, and they'll tell you what the process is. We start looking for speakers in January. Here's the person that hires them, and you send your materials, and you just start calling. For the record, if you've never done this before, here are the numbers. I've spoken to quite a few bureau reps, and they all tell me pretty much the same thing. If you simply buy a list and start calling that list, it's 4 out of 1,000. 4 out of 1,000. I can't believe you called. We were just talking about hypnosis. We're thinking about having, it's like a miracle, 4 out of 1,000. Now, if you made 10 completed calls a day for a year, and you take out weekends and holidays and all that, that's about 2,700 calls. Do the math. If you did 10 calls a day, at the end of a year, you'd have 8 to 10, $5,000. You have 50 grand in your pocket by making 10 calls a day. And that's the random shot. That's the bulk mail approach. So it's not difficult to market. And what you're shooting for is to put out a really good presentation. And when you're done, remember to always ask for referrals. Always ask for referrals. Ask for referrals from the stage. Love what I'm doing. If any of you know anybody that brings in speakers, again, friend, neighbor, member of your family, church group, condominium group, please come up and let me know. You want to get to the point where most of your business is coming from referrals. And then you ultimately want to get to the point where you're well enough known that a bureau would be interested in representing you.
Awesome. Anthony, when's your next training that you're hosting?
I was having one October 8th, and I've decided to reschedule it to January. Okay. I had a conflict come up on my end, so we're in the process of setting the actual date now. It'll be the 3rd or 4th weekend in January. Okay. And as soon as I get that, I'll send you the information. But
all right, awesome. And I'll make sure that it gets out to everyone in the group. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Wonderful. Excellent. Any other questions for Anthony? We have maybe 3 minutes left. That's it. Anyone got a last question?
Good to see you, Brenda.
Good to see you too.
Pop your face up there because you're there.
All right. All right. Anthony, thank you so much. You've been so good to us, and I'm really, really grateful. It's always nice to spend time with you and to hear your perspective about the work you do. Thank you so much.